violence and other kind of violence.
Get away! I could be at work, at school, in my car, I can still get shot by the police, but I can get shot anywhere.
So it is what it is.
What's good, Shadow Realm? It's the Black Gen Z Mindset. Make sure you go ahead and like, comment, share, subscribe, and let's get into the video.
To back in handcuffs all in 1 week.
A St. Louis man accused of murder is behind bars tonight. That's what led up to these tensions boiling over outside a downtown St. Louis courtroom today. Only News 4 has this video of sheriff's deputies trying to get the upset families to disperse.
It is another case putting attention on Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner's office and serial bond violator Daniel Riley. Last month, Riley was out on bond when he was accused of causing a crash leading to a teen volleyball player to lose both of her legs. Prosecutors claim they tried to get Riley's bond revoked, but haven't shown any proof of that.
Tonight, News 4's Investigates continues uncovering how Riley's case is changing how prosecutors handle bond now. News 4 investigator Susan L. Corey was in court as everything unfolded.
Courtroom outbursts continuing on the streets, leaving sheriff's deputies rushing to stop the arguing.
Wow. Look at all the confusion that Miss Gardner is responsible for. She's completely creating chaos in this city. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. The bond hearings, this is all part of the criminal justice reform initiative that has been pushed so heavily. And now we're starting to see the ramifications and repercussions.
This tension from family and friends of Michael Davis as they leave St. Louis Circuit Court without him. Davis was at his daughter's second birthday party in June 2021 when he's accused of murdering another man. He's been behind bars waiting for trial for nearly 2 years. But that changed last week when Judge Michael Mullen released Davis on bond. This order shows Davis was put on house arrest with a GPS monitor. News 4 Investigates reported how that was one of Mullen's last decisions on the bench. He retired the next day.
Wow.
Prosecutors put their objections in writing, filing a motion to have bond reviewed the same day Davis got out. That's why now, a week later, Davis was back in court, this time in front of a different judge, Scott Milliken. During the hearing, Judge Milliken said he's concerned Davis allegedly shot an unarmed man multiple times, and that's why he thought Davis needed to be back behind bars. Davis's lawyer told the court the shooting was self-defense. He also claims there was supposed to be a jury trial in January, but it was pushed back 7 months because prosecutors weren't ready. As he revoked bond, Judge Milliken told Davis, quote, "The system has done a disservice to you, and I'm disappointed in the system." He was cut off as Davis's loved ones started yelling in court, their emotions still clear outside. His family telling News 4 Investigates off camera they believe Davis is caught in the middle as Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner's office faces increased attention when it comes to bond.
Another notable thing happening in court today, the judge called out prosecutors saying they weren't prepared. There's also allegedly video of the shooting. The prosecutor in court today admitted he hadn't seen that video, and he also didn't give it to the judge as evidence. We'll keep asking the Circuit Attorney's office about that. Susan L. Corey, News 4 Investigates.
And currently, trial is set in this case for July. The judge says if it gets pushed back by prosecutors, there could be a need to review bond once again.
New information tonight. Police have identified a teenage girl after she was found dead Tuesday night in St. Louis. For days, police were wondering who Jane Doe could be. But tonight, our Justina Cornell learns more about the 18-year-old.
Tuesday, St. Louis police officers responded to the 2800 block of Franklin Avenue at 10:32 p.m. and found a teenage girl with a gunshot wound on the sidewalk.
So like I told you guys, women, men, children, doesn't matter. In the community, it seems like anybody can get it. And there really is no discrimination when it comes to these bullets being administered by these super gremlins on demon time.
She was pronounced dead at the scene. Police said it appears she ended up there after being shot somewhere else.
It's so unfortunate how she left this earth.
Days after the shooting, police were still trying to identify Jane Doe. It was after posting her Nike shoes and green pants that police finally had a name. Carieal Odysse was just 18 years old.
She was a gentle soul.
So, Carieal Odysse, it looks like she is presenting as a dyke, it appears. And, you know, maybe she was mixed up with some guys who she underestimated and ultimately ended up losing her life. See, that's the kind of balance that you play when you are a lesbian who's like butch or stud or whatever you want to call it. A lot of times they have male friends, and specifically in the community, these male friends are into nefarious activities. So when these women who are presenting as men but are actually women in reality get mixed up with these guys, they treat them as they would treat another black man. And, you know, that's basically making her eat a bullet.
18 years old.
She was a gentle soul, and she just loved to laugh. She always kept a big smile on her face.
Jennings councilwoman Asia Owen says Carieal was her cousin's daughter, and she says to know Carieal is to love her.
She was not a Jane Doe. She was someone who was loved.
As a senior at Parkway West, Carieal was excited for the future.
She was a great basketball player with the hopes of attending the University of Illinois.
But her life was cut short.
I found out through the store manager. She texted and said she was dead.
Sabrina Brewer worked side by side with Carieal as her shift manager at McDonald's.
She was honestly very funny, like comedians. When they identify her, and we were like, this can't be real. The only thing I want to know is why.
It's a question that her friends and family are now wondering. But Owen says it's not what happened to her, but it's the impact she leaves behind is what they'll remember most.
She was somebody's child. She was somebody's friend. She was somebody's, co-worker. She was loved.
Justina Cornell, 5 on your side.
If you have any information on this shooting, you can call anonymously to Crime Stoppers. That number is 866-371-TIPS.
After nearly a year, St. Louis police make an arrest in the death of a Parkway West high school student. 18-year-old Carieal Odysse was found shot to death in the city's Jeff Vanderloo neighborhood last April. Today, police announced 19-year-old Levi Henning has been charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. We're still working to find out if there's a motive.
Yo, what's good, BGZM News 17 family? I'm at the corner of Jesse Jackson and Marcus Garvey, and I got some bad news for you. As you can see, I lost my job. I'm out here living in cardboard boxes outside of boarded up vacant homes. YouTube said I'm done getting money out here in these streets. They even took my funky ass suit. So anything right now would help. So go ahead and hit that Cash App, hit that PayPal, hit that GoFundMe. Hell, cop the merch. Or if you want to make the long-term commitment to the Jinquavius Jackson Fund, join the Patreon so that I can continue to put out top-notch content each and every day. Also, check out the Rumble, where there is absolutely no censorship. Link in the description box below.
Hey, yo, ain't that nigga Jinquavius? Yo, I recognize.
No, that's not me no more.
Hey, yo, run your pop.
Y'all tell me what they say.
Do the opposite of Antonio Brown and take
What
over your
more
store.
do you want from me?
Almost 3 years ago, a suspect in Carieal Odysse's murder has been arrested, but tonight the case is back to square one. And that's because Years ago, a suspect in Carieal Doss's murder has been arrested, but tonight the case is back to square one. And that's because the suspect's attorney says they did their own work and found he was wrongly charged.
Now those charges are gone. And News 4 investigator Susan Elcori is hearing from the defense. They claim this is another case St. Louis Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner has mishandled. Susan?
Well, Corey, all of this comes down to evidence prosecutors are supposed to turn over. Levi Henning's lawyers tells me it took almost 3 years to get all of the records they're entitled to. On top of that, he says the evidence pointed to someone else.
Wow. So it looks like after all this time, this sister is not about to get justice because of the mishandling of another sister who is in a higher position of power and who's supposed to be presiding over these investigations in order to get justice for these families, which we see is not happening.
With one motion, 21-year-old Levi Henning is no longer an accused murderer.
Have you ever seen something like this?
I've never seen a case this bad. Not on the police side and certainly not on the circuit attorney side.
Henning's lawyer, David Mueller, claims his client sat in jail for 3 years, all because St. Louis Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner's office held back evidence that he believes clears Henning's name.
I mean, look at all these sisters in position of power, and look what they're doing with the power. Mishandling court cases, holding people without full evidence. And I don't know who did what. It seems like he might know something about that night, but at this point, he's not going to be really inspired to have a conversation. There's just so many mistakes that go into these cases that must be avoided. That's why you cross your T's and dot your I's when it comes to the way that you gather evidence. But it looks like this sister just overlooked it and even tried to withhold records from the defense that they've had for years, it appears.
Name.
It's either gross negligence or it's a willful denial of defendants' constitutional rights.
It's a case that dates back to April 2020. In the Jeff Vanderloo neighborhood on Franklin Avenue, 18-year-old Carieal Odysse was shot and killed. She was a senior at Parkway West High School. An anonymous tip led police to Henning, who was 18 at the time. The prosecutor on the case was Assistant Circuit Attorney Shrikant Shagarapati. According to court filings, defense lawyers asked for investigative records. Shagarapati turned over some, but not everything, and even wrote in an email that he knew things were missing and he had a lot on his plate. Once a new prosecutor took on the case, additional evidence was turned over. That includes DNA and thousands of pages of Facebook records.
Wow.
Henning also had a lawyer change and hired Mueller. He says that added evidence kept pointing to a different man.
Mr. Chakraparty had all of this information before Mr. Henning was even charged. In my opinion, I don't believe he reviewed it, but he held on to it. And he refused to hand it over.
Mueller also argued in court filings that police signed an affidavit falsely claiming a testing on the gun found on Henning confirmed it was the same one used in the murder.
That report does not exist. In fact, the report that came says the exact opposite.
Wow, they just fumbled the bag on this case, and it looks like Levi's gonna walk, and he may not have been the perpetrator of this crime. I mean, we have to ask, who does the buck stop with? It stops with Kim Gardner.
This is an unconfirmed report.
He believes prosecutors should have caught that or turned over the evidence sooner so the defense could.
There are two people that, in my opinion, that falls on immediately. Mr. Chakraparty himself, but when you have a pattern and practice of this kind of denial of rights, that also falls on his supervising attorneys. In this case, that's Ms. Gardner.
News 4 Investigates keeps asking prosecutors what's next and if there's a new suspect in a now 3-year-old murder case. They haven't answered.
Somebody has to be held accountable for what's happening.
Wow.
Henning is still in jail tonight for a robbery he's accused of from when he was 17. We keep trying to talk to prosecutors and police. At this point, we haven't heard back. We also reached out to Doss's mother. We haven't heard back from her. And it is worth
She called to the left.
noting here that prosecutors did initially in court filings say that they had some of this DNA. They turned it over, but it wasn't all of the reports, and that pointed to another suspect. And a big thing, though, ultimately prosecutors dismissed this case, admitting they just didn't have the evidence.
And Susan, it seems like this case also switched hands a number of times. Why is that?
Well, we had changes with the prosecutor's office. We also had changes with the defense attorney. And again, as all of this was happening, COVID was just hitting when this happened. So all factors there.
Something you'll continue to follow. All right, Susan, thank you.
Questions for St. Louis Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner after a murder case involving a teen high school student is dropped.
The office won't talk about it, but Fox Files investigator Chris Hayes found the dismissal stems from the circuit attorney's alleged mishandling of evidence. Chris joins us with the story you'll see only on Fox. Chris.
Shirley, Mike, defendant Levi Henning is no longer charged with the first-degree murder of former Parkway High student Carieal Odysse. You will find no evidence of the case when you search court records, and we've been asking the circuit attorney's office why. We found out today when we showed up to court.
Wow. So now, I mean, it's pretty much done deal. All the evidence is either sealed or not available for the public, so we don't even really know what exactly went down. We just know that the case was mishandled.
We reported on the murder here behind a Baptist church in 2020. Odysse was found shot in the head on a Franklin Avenue sidewalk in April of that year. The 18-year-old student was just about to graduate Parkway West High School. Fox 2 has now learned the murder charges against the accused was dismissed after allegations the St. Louis Circuit Attorney's Office failed to turn over evidence.
How does something like that happen?
There's only two ways that it can happen. One is gross negligence, and the other is willful denial of my client's constitutional rights.
W. David Mueller represents the man first accused. Mueller was in court today intending to argue his motions to dismiss. Those filings called out the state's failure to disclose evidence, such as at least 8 witnesses, a DNA report, and the victim's Facebook messages and friend contacts.
I've identified in my brief time on this case 4 alternative suspects. One where there's a fair amount of evidence against them, 3 others that I believe had contact with the deceased shortly before her death that have.
And this is a good tactic by the defense attorney. He's taking the case and saying, hey, they mishandled the evidence. Now let's throw 3 other suspects or 4 other suspects into the mix to confuse prosecutors and at least create some reasonable doubt. So, and I mean, he ended up getting the whole case dismissed. So, I mean, it's a W attorney. You know you got a good attorney when his suit look like this. Okay, we've seen a lot worse suits, but his is in tip top shape, crispy, and he ain't losing.
Never been even interviewed.
Mueller also alleged, quote, on April 8th, 2022, the state finally supplemented discovery for the 4th time, providing the full DNA report and more than 2,000 pages of Facebook records that it had in its possession since June 9th, 2020. Counselor Mueller says the circuit attorney's office failures may have cost the state being able to solve this crime.
The government had within their possession, before this case was even filed, information that the deceased was in contact with individuals 5 blocks from where she was found. Those individuals were never interviewed.
Wow.
I believe that if they were interviewed, they would have found a better timeline for what happened to the deceased that day and probably could have solved this case.
Defendant Henning does still face robbery charges for an entirely separate incident. The circuit attorney's office, after failing to answer me for 2 days, now says they're looking into it to get me a possible response. I also reached out to Carieal Odysse's mother, who texted me she does not want to talk about this yet.
Chris, could the Missouri Attorney General investigate this case?
They could, and I have reached out to them as well, and I'm still waiting on a possible response.
All right, thanks, Chris.
Interesting, Chris. Thanks.
gang violence and other kind of violence.
Guess what? I could be at work, at school, in my car, and I can still get shot by the police. I can get shot anywhere.
So it is what it is.